You're welcome to the Economy and Politics Conversation. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. This edition will discuss affordable housing in Nigeria, opportunities and challenges. Joining me virtually for this conversation is Mr. Ayo Ibaru, Chief Executive Officer, NorthCourt. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Ayo. It's been a while.
Thank you so much for having me. Great work the ProShare team are doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, housing is very critical to economic growth. Everybody needs shelter. Shelter is critical. So let's begin by asking how we can achieve a public-private partnership housing model for the mass market in Nigeria. Because, Mr. Ayo, the feedback is that the current real estate development tilts to the high net worth individuals, the elites. Mm-hmm. So what are the incentives to achieve this?
I mean, it's a loaded question you ask, but essentially the elements are, I think, simple for most governments and most participants to understand. Now, I think it's a question of prioritization and understanding, at least from the government's perspective, where the real estate markets, or housing to be more specific, stands in the agenda of any country that chooses to grow. For example, look at countries like China that have pretty much become developed nations today. You will find out that there was a focus on the housing markets. There were incentives and there were, let's just say, regulatory adjustments to encourage the development and the distribution of housing. So as it stands now, housing is, or the real estate market as a whole, is a third of China's GDP. What are the incentives? I think one key incentive would be just accelerating the process of tightening regulation and government/private sector interactions. It takes too long to get anything done, and it's too expensive because with each process you're trying to hurdle, or with each hurdle you are trying to jump through, or with each process you're trying to navigate, you find out that there are too many steps and the entire thing is slow. As another incentive, one might want to begin to discuss, or at least interrogate the idea of a housing subsidy on the part of demand, not supply, because the supply problem is best solved through a different method and not the subsidy system. But in terms of demand, there has to be a level of, whether it's a housing credit system or the taxation system used in quite a number of Western nations, that will be used to encourage demand. That's where I think the incentives should focus. For example, if you look at what's going on with the Mofi Emorif, you will find that
Ministry of Finance Incorporated, real estate investment fund,
correct. The first 150 billion was raised in short order, one would say. Now, the remaining 100 billion that was eventually raised, I think last week, took a bit longer to raise than one would have ordinarily expected, considering the opportunity that is the Nigerian real estate market, with the focus on housing. And that's because we're not sure where the regulatory framework of the government stands in this entire project, with a focus on execution by the developer. So it's a bit counterintuitive, but I'm not entirely sure this is a money problem. Yes, you would need money, you would need resources, but all over the world, Western nations, emerging markets, we find out that the real estate market is really a geared sub-market, which is a lot of borrowing, it's a lot of leveraging, and so on and so forth. The real contribution, and I'll land on this, the real request or requirement as an incentive in my mind would be to get into the weeds of our regulations. I can't be developing 100 units of housing and I have to deal with 20, 30 different regulatory bodies. I can't be using 18 months to get my land titling in order. I mean, Rwanda does 9 days, at most 12, right? I'm using 8 months to get my papers done. It doesn't make sense. And I think that's really where the government should put a lot of emphasis.
And that leads to the next very important question: data. Look at the housing market generally. What is your assessment on the issues of effective data? You know, as a country, are we on the right track with data for housing development? And why I'm asking this is because the former Minister of Power, Works and Housing, he had 3 portfolios. They cut it to Works and Housing. That was Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola, who was former governor of Lagos State. Raised the fact that we don't have accurate data. So when people say 18 million, that's not correct. And the current minister for housing and urban development, because this administration has now been particular about housing, but we need to see more action, has said the same thing, that we don't have accurate data. We need to work on that. That's architect Ahmed Musa Dangiwa. We have a window through the population and housing census, but for now, we're still waiting to know when this will come up. For you in the industry, how are you navigating this whole challenge of data? Because to get it right, data is very important. Every market has thrived, they've worked with data.
You know, it's a very interesting series of questions you've asked, and I'm sure by now the cameraman is probably wondering, why does it look like I was smiling maybe half the time? Because it's, okay, you know what, if you don't mind, let me just touch on a part of the earlier question that you were asking about the data.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yes. So, thank you. One of the reasons why many of the active developers are forced to skew their assets towards higher net worth individuals and funds, so on and so forth, is that ultimately they operate in a market where the pricing of construction materials will be a bit on the high side, and then the cost and also contribute. At the end of the day, the way Nigeria's real estate market works, especially from the developer's perspective, today you should have anything from 40 to 45% of your development, and in this case housing, sold before you break ground. Or else, if there are any price changes mid-process, you may have to bear the brunt of the loss. So in the end, it's best to cater to people who can afford certain amounts, you know, HNIs, as you rightly said, so that if there are any issues, if there's a currency problem, if there's some embargo, if there's some newly found rate hike on imports by the good people of Nigerian Customs Service. That's really where, at the end of the day, developers are just trying to stay alive. Now, are there ways around this? Yes. Are there alternatives to this system? Yes. Is there a chance of developers going for more mass market development programs? Yes. But in the end, they are doing so at their own risk. Maybe that's just a brief summary. I just didn't want that part open. Now, to the data situation, I think I find it amusing when, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I find it somewhat amusing when government officials sound like private sector players, where, you know, they say things like, you know, we don't have the data. That's unrealistic. The idea is that there's a problem that has to be solved, and then the problem has to be appropriately dimensioned. Now, what I can say is, as far as the data conversation is today, Nigeria is in the right direction, but we are moving rather slowly. And that's because when you go to most firms operating today, the importance of data is taken for granted. Everyone knows that data is important.
Very critical.
Records, everyone has historical accounts of different transactions as far back as 20, even 30, and in some cases 40 years. But what you have is that these data points are in silos, so they are in different organizations. There's no one unifying the data in different organizations. And what has now happened is the demand demand for Nigeria's real estate data internationally has leapfrogged the ability to unify the data pockets locally. What do I mean? We now have international organizations that have signed partnerships with a number of local organizations in Nigeria who pretty much have a 60 to 70% data coverage of the entire market. And they have that data exchange or that data trading agreement exclusively. So there are organizations in Nigeria that have access to all the data, significant portion of data, enough to make reliably confident
decisions.
decisions, but they are now in NDAs that they've signed and so on and so forth. What is the way forward? I do know a few associations and institutions in Nigeria have started to get their members to volunteer their data as a way of the contribution of the association to the overall performance of real estate market worldwide. I think it's the naive now. They have some kind of reports that comes out. But I think it's really only on the Lagos. And I haven't seen a recent one this year, but they do have some publication that comes out. So I think in general, we are in the right direction, but we're moving rather slowly. And to add to that, the entire suite of apps and services powered by AI is now making it somewhat easier for individual organizations to get the right data points to make a few conclusions of their own. Now, back to what the government needs to do. I think, again, tying this into the first statement I was trying to make around prioritization, if any government official is going to speak on the real estate market, the only thing we want to hear, to be honest, is how many houses have been delivered this week or this month? How many houses have been delivered this quarter? How many houses can we expect to be delivered over the next or by the end of the year? That's really what we need to hear from the government officials. I read a lot of the speeches, and I think speechwriters are well paid, but I do think there's an absence of what the priorities are. I'm not really sure it gives confidence to the market when the government officials are making certain statements. I mean, they are free to say what they want to say, but in a case where we have a 2.6 to 3% annual population growth and the housing deficit is being increased, it's important to just let us know how many houses are being built, how many are ongoing, how many can we expect at the end of it. Then that can have it will have the right effect on the overall market. That's really what we need to know.
Very important, because we see National Housing Fund, but we need to see the impact of what has been delivered. Legislation is very vital to the growth of the real estate sector, like you've said.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at the advocacy for the review of a very important thing, the Land Use Act. We've talked about it over time. I know it's in the purview of states, but you've talked about titling earlier.
Yes.
Are there states that we can say are templates that other states can learn from that have improved titling and issuance of C of Os and order to enhance activities for housing?
So
generally, how do you see the implementation? Yes.
I mean, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, I guess. Lagos State is still a bit ahead in terms of efficiency. I mean, if what we have in Lagos is called efficient, as far as efficiency goes, we still have a relative attention to ensuring that leases, titles, transactions, and even revocations are done fairly quickly. It's just that what we term as quick is nationally slow, considering that we want to be considered or we want to be seen as a progressive city and indeed a progressive country. Lagos is not doing too bad. Ogun State isn't doing too bad. Oyo isn't too bad. Enugu has made quite a number of announcements, changes in their land titling system or their land management system, which really is, I won't call it a rip-off, but they just pretty much borrowed a bit of what Lagos State is doing. I know Kaduna and so accelerating their efforts as far as increasing the efficiency, land titling, and what have you. But in general, the Land Use Act, I've been saying for years, is the single largest and most onerous stumbling block to growth of Nigeria's real estate markets. There since 1978, hasn't really been adjusted. And it was well intentioned in its composition, but execution has become something of a problem. The idea is to put all, let's just say, the power of land and development and so on and so forth in the hands of the governor, who would use that power for the benefit of the people or the states under which the law covers. But what we have is a bureaucratic nightmare, as it were. Transactions take too long. Transactions can be revoked almost at will. And it's not encouraging to long-term investment. And that goes back to even the knowledge gap around real estate markets and investments. Your average cycle is 20 to 30 years, right? Real estate markets, investments therein are long-term calculation. It's not 2 years or 5 years. We're looking at 20, 30-year cycles. And to be able to invest significant sums over long periods of time, you do need legislation that is stable, legislation that is progressive. You do need that. My read is that the Lagos State government is atop the mountain of destination points for investment, real estate investment. So there isn't that much pressure to change the way things currently work. For example, if I go City, currently they have 29 to 30 different projects ongoing. You still find some key investors in mid-term funds or short to mid-term funds into the Lagos real estate market. So there's quite a bit coming in, and then of course, the returns from existing investments do a lot. But one of the things that we analysts try to look at is the long-term prognosis of the market. And I mean, no one needs to say this, but I mean, going in Lagos will always be relevant, but the future of luxury or high-end investments in commercial is clearly important cities. I mean, I also think Lagos State stands, because of this land titling mismanagement and inefficiency, I also think that the Lagos State government or the Lagos State as a whole is risking losing key markets. For example, commercial real estate, you can split it into industrial, to retail, to data centers, so into hospitality, hotels, restaurants, and so on. I do think Lagos stands the risk of losing a few of those markets. Take, for example, what the state government is doing as far as hospitality is concerned. I mean, I have that coming in our half-year report during the I'll probably send that to you. But what you find is that the Enugu state government and the Delta state government are taking really strong steps to grow their hospitality markets. Now, Lagos still has leading players, right? And so forth. But Lagos doesn't have TransCore Hilton. And Delta State and Enugu State are doing serious work to take away the center or to move the center of hotels, restaurants, and so away from Lagos State. Why is that important? 30 December that happened late last year showed us the potential, or reminded us, or brought it up for those who
tourism potential
capacity of hospitality, and we have that again in our economy. It was quite a lot of, not just, you see, it's not just the money that was made, it's the is the
Experience.
demand, is the level of the
Demand.
demand that was seen, and the fact that Lagos, for the first time in a long time, was at capacity. The hotels couldn't handle it anymore, even after they had moved up their day rentals. The restaurants couldn't handle it anymore. Clubs were booked out, and this was over a roughly 3-week period. So Enugu has seen, Delta State has seen, and Lagos isn't aggressively reviewing its processes as quickly as it should. And that's the risk that was started. If you look at industrial real estate,
Yes.
Ogun State has been knocking on that door for years. Dangote announced that arguably the largest cement
plant
is already ongoing. So Lagos is going to lose that. But Lagos State, again, still has a Dangote refinery. So it will still have that bragging rights for a while. And I think there are opportunities for other states in Nigeria to, in a sense, take advantage of the various subclasses that are available to use as an attraction point for investment. And this is done not by roadshows and not by just making grandiose announcements, but by reviewing the regulations and ensuring that the legalities of doing business in a state's real estate market are the easiest. When people think of the land use act, and I'll end with this, I think we should accept that it is not something our legislators are in a hurry to change, including the government. I think we should accept that. When the time comes, over time, we will build the consensus and change. But clearly, it's been here for 40 years, so let's accept, at least for most of the arguments.
Okay, Ayo, yeah. But I know that from you people, more of our advocacy. That's very important.
Just one point I want to land on. Sorry, I'm talking.
All right. Okay.
The point I'm trying to land on is the various states have to see Nigeria's real estate market as open game. Don't accept that Lagos is the only place head offices can be hosted.
Beautiful.
Accept Lagos State is the only place where the best hospitals can be hosted. Do not accept that Lagos State is the best place that any subclass can be. So whether it's industrial, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's data centers, whether it's hotels, whether it's housing, you have to ask yourself as a state government, SA to a state government, which of these can we take? Because I think Lagos State is a great place to be, but they have no.
Definitely, states must take up the challenge. And Ayo, thank you. So in 1 minute, do we need a state of emergency declared in Nigeria's housing sector? We've seen emergency declared in food security. Do we need that in housing sector?
I think that's too dramatic. And when things are too dramatic in Nigeria, they are not taken seriously.
Okay.
I just think the government needs to prioritize. Everyone is looking at how we can raise money from taxes, how we can afford, how we can ensure revenue growth. That is not possible. It has not happened in the history of the world as we know it today without robust housing.
The most important thing is that we need to create that enabler for more mass markets to access housing, own homes. Like you rightly said, prioritization of the policies and, of course, looking at how public-private partnership can come to play is very important because every citizen deserves it.
I think the private sector is ready, if you ask me. See how long it took them. See how quickly they raised 250 billion. I think the private sector is ready. I think if you ask me, I think the private sector is ready. We have private sector organizations building housing estates in Morocco, in Senegal, in Gambia. They are all based in Nigeria, and in Ghana also. Our public sector is, by global standards, modern day standards, in need of a bit of efficiency. It's not the private sector. I know I'm a private sector guy. I know I am biased towards my people, but look at the budget. Anyway, I don't know how much time we have left. Maybe next time
we'll have a question next time. But to be very candid, Mr. Ayo Ibaru, the most important thing is that whatever public-private partnership is happening in the real estate and housing market, let's take the mass market into consideration. Let's look at all the issues you've said, costs, regulations, so that people can be able to access housing, not just for the high net worth individuals and the upper middle class strata of society. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ayo Ibaru, CEO of NorthCourt, for this very interesting and enlightening conversation on affordable housing opportunities and challenges. Very clear that regulation and practitioner of policy is very good, very important in achieving this. You said the private sector is ready, so all those incentives need to be set in place, and we trust that government will come to that table. We've seen what's happened with the Ministry of Finance Incorporated Real Estate Investment Fund, which again, I dare say, will be more of tilting to the upper class and the HNIs, but we need more structures for the mass market.
Sorry, I have just one more thing to say. And
Okay.
maybe when you have your media meetings, when the media professionals discuss, can we, I'm just suggesting, or I'm just trying to say, can we look at this from number of houses built and not amounts of money? Number of houses built, not amounts of money. Yeah.
Definitely. We need to see impact, and from there know where we are as a country. Very well said. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ayo Ibaru, CEO of NorthCourt, for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. To our viewers, if you want to get further insights on this conversation, visit the ProShare website displayed on the screen and follow our social media platforms to engage further. Until you come your way again and reach yourself with knowledge of socioeconomic developments around you, it is wise. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.